Now, I haven't checked his readings, and I haven't checked it, but he's referring constantly to anthropologists like Muller and people who've done research in the field. That's not his research he's referring to, and Muller is still recognised as an authority in the area of sort of ethnic groups. So he's digging on solid science basis, which is still recognised now, although it has been far more complicated. But the references which he's making are there. So, can you read that? Is that diagram readable to you?
Yeah. I can't see the words. I can see the words now. Once you said that, I can read them now.
Yeah. So what he's given literally in terms of how he's seen the evolution of the colour sense in human beings. And it tallies with the nature of colour blindness that as it appears in patterns. He goes into lots of details with this and proves it to his satisfaction, and he certainly got me questioning my understanding. But this is stuff which of course we could never nail down finally in a scientific sense, but it certainly looks as if there has been an evolution, certainly of our reception of colour. And whether this is because of the nature of the eyeballs or the brain centres which are actually coming to terms with this, but an awful lot of animals don't seem to recognise colour in anything like the way we do. Some of them do. Some of them respond to colours that we can't see. You know, they respond to things beyond infrared or beneath ultraviolet. Colours that we cannot see, and they're present in flowers to attract insects, etc. So yes, there are vibrations that can be seen. But as he points out, is it just coincidence that the red is actually the most intense energy light wave that we can measure, and that was the first one that seemed to appear, with black, which would be the least. And from that black comes out blue, etc. The primitive people seem to see black and blue as one colour. Just like the Chinese didn't have a word for sheep and goats, they had one word for both. Did they not distinguish the fact that they were two different species and that they couldn't interbreed? Well, they must have done, but it wasn't obviously important to them enough to be able to talk about it because they hadn't got a word for it. So they might have said those tall sheep with the big horns that climb mountains. Oh yes, those. Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually you get a shorthand and you say the goats. You mean? Yeah. But they never got to that stage.
What's tall farm animals?
Yes. And even now we don't have a singular for cattle. We only have the male or the female. We don't have a cat. You know, cat. Yeah. And for sheep, the word that singular is the same as the plural, because of course the Anglo-Saxons didn't have the same plural systems as we did. So you have one sheep, and you also have 8 sheep. There aren't many words you can do that where the plural is the same as the singular. It shows you that they came from a different language. It wasn't the Latin-based sort of English that we did. So
isn't cow the singular?
No, because that's only a female. It doesn't. If you saw over there a cattle, right, you can't say I can see a cattle. You'd have to guess whether it was a bull or a cow.
Yes, okay.
You haven't got a word for the genus yet. And the other one, which is fascinating, I think we may have pointed this out, that it's Anglo-Saxon words for the animal, and it's always French words for the meat. So you have cattle, but you eat beef. You have sheep, but you eat mutton. Yeah. You have pigs, but you eat pork. So obviously the Normans ate them, and we just looked after them in the field. It's terrifying, isn't it? Language, you see, these remnants carry with them so much meaning. So much meaning. And you hadn't noticed that. You brought it up. No, you know. So when a child says there's several sheepses out there, mummy, they're right and we're wrong. You know. And why does a pig, give you pork? You know?
So how
what's a hog? Well, hog is.
How would you translate the meaning of the cosmic consciousness that you become exposed to when you're limited in your concepts are limited by your language?
Completely. Yes.
So, you get this sudden flash of, according to him, this sudden flash of inspiration, right? Except it presumably means nothing to you as far as trying to say what it is.
Exactly. And well, what we could say, it has a meaning, but you cannot, that meaning is locked inside you. You can't give it to anybody because no damned words for it. And if it's as people constantly say, like Eugene and Brooke is saying, it is edgeless, it's got no forms inside it, you cannot describe anything which hasn't got a form. There's no, words only bounce off forms, and if you haven't got a form in this thing, you're stuck like the Buddha, and he says it's thusness, suchness, the suchness of things. Yeah, I get the feel of what he's saying, but I wish he'd be a bit more specific. And if you look for the specifics, you will never get the thusness. So constantly people are trying to somersault backwards and give you the meaning for something with which there can be no meaning, because it's beyond any formal thing. So yes, and exactly that's why he's got, as far as I'm concerned, a legitimacy when he says that when the Buddha means this, he means the same thing as St. Paul when he means that, and when Dante says this, he means the same thing as all of them, and they're all talking about the same thing, and the humans are going to slowly start moving towards it, whether they like it or not. You know, which is what Mohammed says. Whether you like it or not, God is revealing himself in the world. Whether you know, he didn't ask you, you weren't at the meeting, it's going to happen. And so get on with it. Which is the attitude of Islam, you know. It's coming at you. Right, so if you look at that, you can see that you've got the spectrum there, as it is at this moment, because presumably this is going to go on, and we can't talk about the colours we can't see yet. But the universe has got a whole spectrum beyond the spectrum that we know and recognise. Animals can respond to it, machines can respond to it, the machines can see these things. Ultimately, presumably, human beings will start to find more colours than we have at the moment. Our eyes will start to respond to them in more specific ways. Now, we only have a certain number of rods and cones in our eyes, so whether they will change and develop, I don't know.
Yes, but still, everything's still evolving.
Yes. Yeah. As he talks about on those things, he talks about the horse developing now. We tend to think of a horse as one thing, but at one time they were the size of a cat, weren't they?
Yeah.
So we have to recognise that the horse thing is really frozen in time for us. We see it as this noble creature, you know, which constantly costs me money on Derby Day. But you know, they were at one time very little tiddly. To say to you then was, okay, so we've heard Bucke's description of cosmic consciousness. The book is then, after he goes through the, he then goes on to talk about the musical sense, and what he's saying to is, so when you're looking at art, you think you're doing something highly refined, and you are doing something highly refined, but it's a biological push, if you like, it's an evolutionary push, which is making you notice these damn things. And an artist is putting something down, which by your recognition, you're both actually bouncing this thing of, aren't we getting more sophisticated? And it's a consciousness thing that is being pushing through you. And when you hear music, and those relationships, and you're picking up the harmonies and stuff, this is something which is quite new to the human race, later than the colour sense.